Ilene Wood, and welcome to today's episode of Bag Lunch. We are continuing with our Let's Get to the Point needlepoint theme. And today we are going to look at handbags that celebrated fashion, but fashion that was homemade. Back in the day, a lot of women learned to sew and would make clothes at home. And this may have been something that was instilled in them from the time of the Second World War, when people didn't have access to clothing and they had to make their own at home. And this was also something that was nurtured through home economics classes all over the country that were very popular in the 50s and 60s. So people had a tradition of making their own clothes at home. And these are examples of not identical but similar pre-worked canvases that show all of the tools and implements that would be used in dressmaking. And this is one of my favorites because of the bright pink background. And I think it's very sophisticated that she chose to have this mustard brown as trim. It picks up the colors of the tape measure and the thimble. This design is very similar to the last, but this one also celebrates knitting. So it was a lot of different crafts that could be accomplished at home. And what we see here is a pair of scissors, a tape measure, a skein of yarn for needlepoint, a knitting ball of yarn with needles, a little strawberry that would be something with which you held your needles, a spool of yarn, a thimble. And these are just really charming depictions of all of the different elements and implements, the buttons, the pins, everything that came into crafting and fashion at that time. This is yet another version of the same subject matter. And this one brings in a pair of eyeglasses. So perhaps this woman added this to her mix because she might have been nearsighted. And to her, the eyeglasses were integral to her needlepoint and to her fashion creations. This is a needlepoint that once again celebrates the home crafting, but this one has a dressmaker's dummy, as well as the elements we looked at before. And what is most special about this particular purse is that the woman who purchased the canvases did not want to take the time and effort and money to send it off to be professionally finished. So she completed this bag herself, and she used plastic handles that would have been used on a knitting or sewing bag. And she used these plastic handles, which were very inexpensive and available at most craft stores, to complete the bag on her own. This bag is quite unusual in that it features the identical canvas that you just saw a moment ago with the plastic handles. But this particular design was one that was sent out, and I believe this design probably dates to the late 50s. And the reason I say this is that the shape of this bag is identical to a very popular bag at the time done by the designer Bonnie Cashin. And it was referred to as her Cashin carry bag. And this bag has the identical form and shape to that bag, except instead of being completely out of leather, the woman took the design of that popular bag and interpreted it as a needlepoint. This final bag is tremendously interesting in that it celebrates the design seen on the last two needlepoint canvases. However, it was done by the contemporary designer Anna Sui, and she is riffing on the tradition of needlepoint handbags. She has plastic handles that are very stylized, and it's a fashionable version of what we saw here in the actual utilitarian plastic handles. But these are oversized and very stylized, and she incorporates her name into it. And I love that she puts the little saying down here, "A stitch in time saves 9." And this was a bag that was actually recently featured in a museum exhibition of Anna Sui's work at a show in New York at the Museum of Art and Design. So I was really pleased to see a handbag that I have in my collection celebrated in a contemporary museum exhibition, one that is not my own. So once again, thank you for joining us for today's episode of Bag Lunch.